The balance of the Force. It's often mentioned in Star Wars, but it's still fiercely debated, both in and out of universe. Even until this day, there is no consent on what the balance of the Force actually is. However, there's an objective answer, and today we will discover it together. Let's start by looking at several theories about the balance and discuss if they are true or not. The first theory I want to talk about is the numerical balance theory. It claims that balance in the Force is achieved by an equal number of Jedi and Sith. But there's one small problem with this theory. It ignores the plot of the Skywalker saga. Anakin's sacrifice in the first death of Palpatine is explicitly portrayed as a good thing, not as a balance-destroying catastrophe. Another problem with this theory is that it legitimizes evil actions. If balance in the Force is the same as an equal amount of Jedi and Sith, the Sith's dark deeds would be a natural part of life, meaning that slavery, genocide and fascism are legit to an extent. But I think we can all agree that this is absolute bullshit. Such a balance would never work for obvious reasons. Another theory is the Grey Jedi theory. Normally this theory shouldn't be a thing, because George Lucas and Dave Filoni stated that Grey Jedi do not exist. But I want to talk about it nonetheless, because this theory is based upon major misunderstandings. Proponents of this theory claim that it is possible to unite the light and dark side of the Force. Examples of Force users who are said to have achieved this include Jolee Bindo, Revan and Qui-Gon Jinn. But if you look closer, you see that these beings are either Darksiders with seemingly honorable goals, or a different kind of Lightsider. Jolee Bindo, for example, is not a grey, but a lazy Jedi. He isn't opposed to romantic love, but he is opposed to cruelty and extreme egoism. His willingness to fight the dark side is not very high, but that doesn't mean that he advocates Sith teachings. Qui-Gon is similar. Like Jolee, Qui-Gon didn't oppose romantic love, and he was more than willing to break the rules of the Council if he thought it was beneficial. But this is the important thing to mention when talking about both men. The Jedi Council was extremely dogmatic by the time of the Jedi Civil War and the Clone Wars. This dogmatism led oftentimes to a whole lot of unnecessary suffering. During Jolee's time, it forced Jedi to abandon the Order to have a romantic relationship. Jolee opposed the proscription of romantic love, because Jedi who left the Order for their loved ones usually fell to the dark side. He explained to Revan that love will save a person if the negative emotions resulting from attachment are controlled.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in love? Truly in love, I mean, and not simple infatuation. Exactly. You're still at the beginning of your life. There will be women in your life, perhaps many women. But if you're fortunate, you'll find love once. The Jedi, with their damnable sense of over-caution, would tell you love is something to avoid. Thankfully, anyone who's even partially alive knows that's not true. Love doesn't lead to the dark side. Passion can lead to rage and fear and can be controlled. But passion is not the same thing as love. Controlling your passions while being in love, that's what they should teach you to beware. But love itself will save you, not condemn you. Love causes pain, certainly. Inevitably, love is going to lead to as much sorrow and regret as it does joy. I suppose there are perfect, eternal loves out there, but I haven't seen any. And how do you deal with the bad part of love is what determines your character. What determines the dark side's hold over you.
What Jolee is criticizing here is not the Jedi Code or the light side, but the Council's execution of dogmatic rules. The Order forbade romantic relationships because they didn't want to deal with the issue of teaching their students how to manage a romantic relationship without being controlled by attachment. Master Qui-Gon advocated the same approach to romantic love as Jolee did, but he was additionally disgusted by the Jedi's submissiveness to the Galactic Senate. Oftentimes Republic law or Senate orders made it outright impossible to do the right thing. Qui-Gon hated this, and he broke the rules several times because of it. The orders of the Council or the Senate meant nothing to him if they stood in the way of the will of the Force. Both men are Lightsiders. What about Revan? I already made an entire video about him, so I won't talk about him in detail. But in short, he isn't a great Jedi either. He never successfully controlled both the light and the dark side. KOTOR 2 established Revan's complex character, And although he isn't portrayed as a totally evil being, the game doesn't justify his actions either. It rather asks the question why Revan made the decisions he did. These questions are supposed to be a teaser for the true Sith. The game takes you to several planets, all negatively affected by Revan's decisions, and you are supposed to ask yourself at the end of the game how evil the true Sith must be if he was willing to sacrifice and corrupt billions of beings to stop them. His goals and methods are understandable, but Revan wasn't good because of his goals. Many evil beings, including real-world examples like Hitler and Stalin, had understandable goals as well. Hitler, for example, wanted to liberate Europe from the so-called Jewish threat. The Nazi propaganda was partially based on truths. There are powerful Jewish families, and not all of them have the best interests of society in mind. But this doesn't justify his actions against innocents. Revan is of course not Space Hitler, but he has to be judged by the same standard. Darth Revan was unique, but ultimately still a darksider. A man who has been corrupted by war, atrocities, and fear. But what about Revan's Force alignment after the Jedi Civil War? Did he achieve the balance between the light and the dark side? No. The Council impregnated him with a second personality during the Jedi Civil War, and after his old personality was restored, he broke. Revan was the victim of a multiple personality disorder, and half of him was a lightsider and the other half a darksider. But these personalities didn't work together. They only influenced each other, resulting in madness. When his dark side personality returned after his death in the Foundry, he may have fought the Jedi and Sith, but this doesn't mean that he successfully managed to unite the light side and the dark side. He was driven crazy by his hatred for the Emperor and everything he had lived through. The reborn Revan was a schizophrenic darksider, and actually the prime example of a being that tried to unite the light and dark side. Revan contradicted himself during that period, driven schizophrenic by the lasting impact his light side had on his dark side. He recruited allies within the ranks of the Sith and Jedi, but he wasn't willing to ally with the hero of Typhon, despite the fact that the hero had proven that Vitiate can be defeated. He claimed to save the galaxy from the Emperor, but made his return inevitable. Revan was never once in his life able to unite both the light and the dark side. But if no one was ever able to unite the light and dark side, what is the balance of the Force? Is the night an unnatural part of the day? No, actually not. The night is very important for the balance. But the dark side is not the night. It's an everlasting, unnatural darkness, sometimes known as Finland. Just kidding. Let's look at George Lucas' explanation of the Force.
The core of the Force. I mean, you got the dark side, the light side. One is selfless, one is selfish. And you want to keep them in balance. What happens when you go to the dark side is it goes out of balance, and then you get really selfish and you forget about everybody, and you ultimately lead yourself, because when you get selfish, you get stuff, or you want stuff. And when you want stuff and you get stuff, then you are afraid somebody's going to take it away from you, whether it's a person or a thing or a particular pleasure, experience.
At first you may be thinking, what the heck is he talking about? In the first half of the scroll, he confirms the balance between the light and dark side, and in the second half, he claims that the dark side upsets the balance. Now, this quote is not schizophrenic, but poorly explained. The balance of the Force is not the balance between the light and the dark side, but the balance between selflessness and selfishness. Falling to the dark side is egoism in the extreme, and it therefore upsets the balance. It is the promise of instant gratification that leads you on an empty road to hell. But this gratification is never everlasting. So you continue to follow the path of uncontrolled egoism in search for ultimate fulfillment. But you will never be satisfied. One day real-world example? Look at modern sex lives. Most people can't even define love properly and reduce it to sexual pleasure. Love is a union, an alliance forged for the purpose of achieving a shared goal against all odds. During the adventure, both partners complement each other, and their child will learn from them, uniting both complementary strengths and eclipse them in wisdom, resulting in a child able to preserve what his parents achieved and even expand upon it. Sex was originally the embodiment of this union and simultaneously the means to create this child of wisdom. But this knowledge is mostly lost, replaced by a corrupted version solely focused on instant gratification. If you follow the true path of love, you can die peacefully, knowing that you achieved something far greater than any material success. But what do you get for simping? One-night stands and purely sexual relationships. Brief pleasure. After some hours you want more. It becomes an addiction, and many are only able to control this addiction through another addiction. This is weakness. This is the dark side. You can see this corruption during every single day. Did you ever lost a girl or boyfriend you love because you couldn't properly satisfy the sexual desires of your partner? Yes? Then you have felt the dark side yourself, the corruption it spreads. What was your reaction? Perhaps it resulted in you rejecting another girl that truly loves you. You suffered because of the dark side and unknowingly spread suffering yourself, increasing the reach of corruption. That is the only natural part of the dark side. If we reject the will of the Force, the balance between selflessness and selfishness, the Force punishes us by spreading corruption. It is an act of defiance. If the whole world falls to the dark side, the resulting corruption will destroy life itself in every possible way. But don't be fooled by selflessness either. The balance exists for a reason. Extreme selflessness results in destruction as well. You weaken yourself and weaken others. Energy is not infinite. Only invest when you get more or the same amount of energy in return. Let others fight their own battles, but don't be cruel and inflict suffering on purpose to test them. Only challenge them to an unnatural degree with their consent, unless they spread corruption. This is the balance of the Force. Think about everything I said and live according to it, if you decide to make the balance your guiding principle. Never forget, the Force is an allegory for causality. But with these words, I release you from this video, and I want to know what you think about this topic. Until next time guys, may the Force be with you.